Hello, I'm Deborah Chung with the State University of New York. I'm very pleased to discuss with you today, how do scientists view God? In a survey in the US in 2009, one finds that 41% of scientists do not believe in God or a higher power. But among the general public, only 4% holds this notion. This is a little more detail about the religious belief among the general public and the scientists in comparison. The percentage that doesn't believe in God, 83% for the general public, but only 33% for the scientists. The percentage that don't believe in God, but do believe in a universal spirit or higher power, 12% for the general public, but 18% for scientists. And the percentage that don't believe in either is only 4% for general public, but 41% for the scientists. And the agnostics, only 2% for the general public, but 11% for the scientists. For the atheists, 2% for the general public, but 17% for the scientists. The scientists of the past centuries who believe in God are numerous, all these very famous scientists. One of them is Isaac Newton, who founded classical mechanics. He says, "He who thinks half-heartedly will not believe in God, but he who really thinks has to believe in God." Now, why do today's scientists tend not to believe in God? I want to emphasize the word tend, because I don't mean that all of them don't believe in God. It's just a tendency. There are 8 pitfalls that I have identified. Pitfall 1, not recognizing the limitations of science. The first limitation of science is that science considers the physical realm, but not the spiritual realm. God is a spirit. And human beings have not only the body, but also the soul and the spirit. The body is the physical part. The spirit is the non-physical part. The spirit is for interacting with God. And knowing God is not a matter of analysis. This indicates the love of the Creator. Pascal is another one of those scientists of the past centuries who believe in God. He said, "There is a God-shaped vacuum in every heart." The spiritual realm really exists, and there's good as well as evil in the spiritual realm, and there is spiritual warfare going on. Dr. Richard Gallagher is a psychiatrist and a Christian in New York. With the help of a priest, he healed many people who were possessed by evil spirits. He said, "It took a lot of people to hold her down during the exorcism. Evil spirits exhibit extraordinary powers, such as personal knowledge. Once the evil spirit told him the cause of his mother's death, ovarian cancer." He also said, "A trained psychiatrist can easily tell the difference between demonic possession and other mental illnesses." The second limitation of science is that science cannot address the change from non-life to life. Darwin put forth the theory of evolution. And in this so-called tree of life, it starts out with a single-cell organism at the bottom, and it evolves to form various plants and animals. However, Darwin did not explain how the single-cell organism was formed. Life is powerful. This acorn becomes the big oak tree. These geese, now the weight and height almost double every week. So in just a few weeks, they become almost full grown. Here's a flock of geese during autumn migration. In general, birds migrate, and their routes can be pretty long, thousands of miles, but the birds have the ability to navigate. Aircraft navigate using computers and satellites, but the birds don't use computers, don't use satellites. And many migratory birds return to the same areas every spring, even after traveling thousands of miles to and from their wintering grounds. This shows the wisdom and love of the Creator. Babies are born with the innate intelligence to learn any language. The ability to learn language is highest before the age of 3. That's the power of life. Children can even learn English and Chinese at the same time. However, adults have a much harder time. It's not so easy for adults to learn English, for instance. Children have an innate ability to learn language, and this shows the wisdom and the love of the Creator. We are the intellectual property of the Creator. The mentality and thoughts of many scientists today are the focus of what I am going to talk about in an organized fashion. First of all is the mentality of not noting the limitations of science. Science cannot address the spiritual realm, and it cannot address the origin and power of life. Because of this mentality, there are these 5 thoughts. Not believing in the spiritual world because science cannot prove its existence. Humans and animals are only physical entities and have no spirit. Therefore, the value of humans and animals is similar. Not believing in revelation, thus not believing that the Bible is God's revelation. The origin or power of life cannot be explained, but it is not attributed to God. Believing that there is no life after death. Pitfall 2, anything that science cannot prove cannot be trusted. Jesus changed water to wine. Water and wine are different in the chemical composition. Then how come? How can this happen? Well, the spiritual realm can involve supernatural events, but the physical realm can only involve natural events. Another mentality is anything that science cannot prove cannot be trusted. Due to this mentality, there are these 4 thoughts. Believing only natural events, not supernatural events. Not believing miracles. Not believing the resurrection of Christ. Not believing events in the spiritual realm. Pitfall 3, not accepting the requirement of experimental support of a theory. Consider the formation of the universe. There is this Big Bang concept, meaning that the universe started at a particular time and a particular point in space. The person that put forth that concept is George Lemaitre. He was a physicist and a Catholic priest. He is the father of the Big Bang theory. In 1951, Pope Pius XII believed that Lemaitre's theory confirmed the doctrine of creation. However, Lemaitre objected to this official statement by the Pope. Lemaitre explained that there is difference between Big Bang and creation. Big Bang involves formation of matter, space, and time, but creation involves the universe being raised from not being into being. Big Bang involves the development of matter, but creation involves the creation of matter. In Big Bang, everything prior to that had no influence to our universe, but in creation, it's an absolute beginning. Lemaitre also put forth the concept of the expansion of the universe. He even calculated the rate of expansion of the universe. the expansion involves the stars moving farther and farther away from the Earth. Lemaitre was ordained as priest in 1923. In 1925, he became professor in Catholic University. In 1927, he published his paper on the expansion of the universe. In 1928, he published his paper on the Big Bang theory. In 1966, just before his death, the expansion of the universe became supported by experiment. Lemaitre insisted that there is neither connection nor conflict between his religion and science. Einstein accepted the concept of the expansion of the universe only later. The science involved in the Big Bang, all the physicists' calculations, are actually all within the 1 second from the bang, 1 second. But they pushed the concept to 30,000 years for the planets to come out, 115,000 million years for human beings to come out. And to push it that far, it really is not reliable science. So science is very far from explaining the formation of the universe. With 15,000 million years, it's really a matter of science fantasy. Speculation should not be considered as fact. In the scientific method, one starts with observations, such as there is a universe, and then one has certain hypotheses, and then one does a certain experiment to test the hypothesis. And if the hypothesis and experiment don't quite agree, then you go back and modify the hypothesis and redo the experiment until there's some degree of agreement. And after that, you come up with a theory or model. And then you further do experiment to test that theory. If it's not quite in agreement, you would go back to modify the theory until there is reasonable agreement between the theory and experiment. But in relation to the formation of the universe, the scientists have, they just don't do the experiment anymore, saying that it's too hard to do. No experiment here, no experiment there. As a result, all one can say is that what they are claiming is possible. Possible is the bottom here, and then plausible, and then probable, and the very top is the truth. Okay, it's not very good to say that something that's possible is the truth. Let's consider the origin of mankind. The Peking man is something that the Chinese people learn from their childhood. And today scientists are very much affected by Darwin, who put forth the theory of the evolution. And that evolution means that ape evolves and become man. And this is macroevolution because it involves really a change of species. Ape and man are different species altogether. To prove that evolution, you need to observe the intermediate forms called ape-man. But these intermediate forms cannot be observed. They are just imaginary. They are just drawn there. Okay. Macroevolution differs from microevolution. Macroevolution has never been observed because it involves different species and severe change in the DNA. However, microevolution is widely observed. It just involves the same species, say the dog's tail getting longer or shorter. It involves some change in the frequency of the DNA. An illustration of microevolution is the use of pesticide to kill insects. This is the first generation, and it's mostly green, just one red here. And after the application of pesticide, most of the blue ones got killed, leaving the red one there. And then after some generations, you have about equal numbers of red and green, and then after pesticide application, most of the green gets killed, and so you end up with the majority of the insects being red, in contrast to the first generation where the majority of the insects are green. And this is microevolution, and there's no problem with this. The DNA differs greatly among species, and so macroevolution must involve great change in the DNA. And this change involves mutation. The left is a normal DNA, and the right is a mutated one. It's kind of messed up here. Okay? And here's the normal cell, first mutation, second mutation, third, and so on. And after so many mutations, it became malignant, cancerous. No good. Now, evolution should result in advancement, not cancer. The mechanism of evolution is mutation, and this mechanism is highly questionable. This is the relative frequency of mutations resulting in something deleterious or something beneficial. The vast majority of mutations results in something that is deleterious. The beneficial ones, just this little tail here. Okay. Evolutionists assume that macroevolution involves a series of microevolutions. But if it's a series, then it must take many, many years. So one needs to figure out how old the fossils are. And here it shows the percent of the original carbon-14 that's remaining versus the years. And it gets less and less over time, and by about 57,000 years is nothing left. It's like zero, nothing to see. Okay? So if one claims that by carbon-14 dating you get more than 57,000 years, that's really questionable. Further, to calculate the age, the carbon-14 content in the sample is compared to the carbon-14 content at the beginning. But the beginning content is not well known, so this percentage here is a little iffy. The archaeologists consider archaeological layers. The present Earth's surface is at the top. The deeper, the older. And using this concept, they say that for the same layer, you have the same historical age. That is, various things that occur in the same layer have about the same historical age. This is actually an assumption. And because of that assumption, the fossils and the nearby rocks are considered to be of the same age. But that assumption is very questionable if one considers Noah's flood. This flood pushed all the bones and all the rocks for long distances, all messed up. Okay, so you cannot say after this flood, you still have the bones and the nearby rocks of similar age. And this shows a slide of NOVA, which is the most watched primetime science series in the US. And it talks about such millions, hundreds of millions of age. And this huge age is very unreliable. But evolutionists like to accept huge ages. Another mentality that thus is that there is less and less recognition that theories must be supported by experiments. If experiment is impossible, well, accept the theory, viewing something plausible to be a proven fact. Increasingly, no distinction is made between speculation and proven knowledge. Due to this mentality, there are these three thoughts. Firstly, for issues that are difficult to prove scientifically, we are willing to accept speculations as fact for now and believe that sooner or later the evidence will materialize. This is how science progresses. Secondly, accept the scientific theory of the formation of the universe because it cannot be proven. Thirdly, if evolution occurs over millions of years, it is possible, and thus it is acceptable. Pitfall 4, accepting consensus science. Consensus science means if a certain concept is accepted by the majority of scientists, then it becomes an accepted fact. However, only science can provide a path to truth, not the survey of expert opinion. Why is evolution considered to be more scientific than creation? The rise of consensus science. The views of a minority are silenced in the scientific literature. Atheism's powerful position among scientific elites, trusting scientific papers more than the Bible. Many Christians even partially believe the Bible. Kepler was another scientist of the past centuries who believed in God. He said, "I much prefer the sharpest criticism of a single intelligent man to the thoughtless approval of the masses." So another mentality is accepting consensus science. And this mentality results in these two thoughts. Creation is not scientific, but evolution is. Do not accept scientific findings that do not support consensus science. Pitfall 5, interpretation of scientific data beyond the correct meaning. The DNA molecule is a molecular data storage containing genetic instructions for all development and function. The genetic similarity between people is 99.9%. As a result, these girls, different hair color, they are actually very similar, 99.9% similar in the genetics. In spite of that 99.9%, the DNA of different people can be used to differentiate among people. The genetic similarity between people and chimps is less, is 95%. Between people and cats is even less, 90%. Between people and mice, even less, 85%. Between people and cows, even less, 80%. Between people and chicken, 60%. Between people and banana, 60% also. The DNA molecule has these horizontal stripes which contain the data, okay? The data that dictates the genetics. And these horizontal stripes are called base pairs. And human and chimp are kind of similar, but there is important difference in the chromosomes between human and chimp. Each human cell contains approximately 3 billion base pairs. 1.2% of that equates to about 35 million differences. So a DNA difference of 5%, that is 95% similarity, is a big, big difference. Even though 95% of the base pairs in chimp and human DNA are identical, chimps and human are very different. And scientists often use this to claim that humans and chimps are close relatives. So the mentality here, interpretation of scientific data beyond correct meaning. Because of that mentality, there are these three thoughts. Chimps share 95% DNA similarity with humans, making them our closest ancestors. Carbon-14 dating is reliable for millions of years. Determining the age of the rocks next to the fossil is reliable for dating the fossil. Pitfall 6, not recognizing historical records. The creation process is strongly supported by facts and observations. science is too limited to fully demonstrate the process of creation. The Bible is a wonderful history book, very detailed, starting with Adam, one generation after another. And here's Noah, and there's the flood occurring in 2348 BC. And the flooding period is 300 days. Afterward, there's a post-flood drying period of 70 days, during which Noah remains in the ark, waiting for the stuff outside to dry. During the drying, you have sedimentation, with the muddy water becoming mud at the bottom and clear water at the top. So sedimentary rocks form in the dry period that follows a flood. This is the Grand Canyon, and these horizontal features signify that they are sedimentary rocks. And 73% of the Earth's surface is covered by sedimentary rocks. The consequences of Noah's flood have been confirmed by archaeology. When the flood occurred, mass death occurred, so the fossils are fully formed and have not evolved from previous forms. Most fossils are found in sedimentary rocks. Simple and complex creatures are all mixed together. Fossils support creation, not evolution. Fossils are fully formed and do not have any evolutionary history. The fossils remain unchanged, all looking alike. Another mentality is that historical facts are not very accepted because it is difficult for science, including archaeology, to completely prove history. Thus, there is this thought: do not believe in biblical records and regard them as myths, such as God's creation process and Noah's flood. Pitfall 7. Understanding a process implies that God is not involved in that process. That is, there is no need for God to participate. Light is a wave, and it propagates at a certain speed. As a result, time is defined. And because of this propagation at a certain speed, distance, that is space, is also defined. Light is an electromagnetic wave with magnetic field and electric field inside. Thus, energy is introduced with electric field and magnetic field introduced. A pitfall example is understanding light is taken to mean that God did not create light. Now, light defines time and space and introduces energy. It makes sense that God created light on the first day. Another scientist of the past centuries who believe in God is Maxwell. He is the father of electromagnetic radiation, which includes light. He said, science is incompetent to reason upon the creation of matter itself out of nothing. Now, the planets move around the sun. And because of this motion and because of the angle of the north-south axis of the Earth, there are the 4 seasons. And this angle is very important. It's been fine-tuned, 23.5 degrees, thus resulting in the 4 seasons. A pitfall example is understanding the origin of the seasons is taken to mean that God played no role in realizing the seasons. Kepler is the one that put forth the laws of planetary motion. He said, since we astronomers are priests of the highest God in regard to the book of nature, it befits us to be thoughtful, not of the glory of our minds, but rather, above all else, of the glory of God. Einstein said, the more I study science, the more I believe in God. This famous equation of Einstein means that mass is energy. So simple, but groundbreaking. Einstein said, when the solution is simple, God is answering. Galilei said, the laws of nature are written by the hand of God in the language of mathematics. The Big Bang theory is such that Big Bang occurred at a particular time and point in space. And Lemaitre is the father of that. And he showed that the universe expanded and is still expanding. 1 second here. You have, say, 300,000 years here, and the planets form, and then like 15,000 million years at the right, human beings are formed. You know, these calculations were all in 1 second, but the rest is really a kind of imagination. A pitfall is understanding a little about the formation of the universe is taken to imply that God is not involved in forming the universe. Hawking said, before we understood science, it was natural to believe that God created the universe, but now science offers a more convincing explanation. Sperm and egg come together, leading to conception. The sperm penetrates the egg, fertilization completes the body's genetic makeup, including whether it will be a girl or a boy. However, in spite of all this understanding of conception, we have a lot of infertility problem right now. And often the problem cannot be determined. And that's why infertile, very often the reason is not clear. Another big thing about making babies is that the baby's DNA is different from those of the parents. The Creator must provide new DNA at conception. The biggest problem with organ transplant is that the body naturally rejects the implanted organ, which has different DNA. The mother's DNA differs from the fetus DNA, but the mother doesn't reject the fetus. That's because the cells that eventually form the placenta produce a hormone that causes the mother not to reject the fetus. So the Creator set up the science of placenta. A pitfall example is that understanding the conception is taken to imply that God is not involved in conception. Producing a baby is really a miracle. Another scientist of the past centuries who believe in God is Pasteur. He is the one that invented vaccination, fermentation, and pasteurization. He said, the more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator. Science brings men nearer to God. Let's consider the forming of weather. The water evaporates and forms cloud, and then you have precipitation from the cloud to the water. Okay? And there's cold air moving to the right, and the warm air gets to move up, and thus forming the cloud. So a pitfall example is understanding weather formation is taken to imply that God is not involved in weather formation. Now, the movement of just one of these clouds by a little bit can change your garden from being under the sun to not under the sun. A mentality is understanding a process is taken to imply that God is not involved in that process. Examples include weather formation, 4 seasons, universe formation, and light formation. And due to this mentality, the thought is, as science progresses, God's role or work diminishes. But the Bible says, for I, the Lord, do not change. Newton said, what we know is a drop. What we don't know is an ocean. Maxwell, the father of electromagnetic radiation, said, thoroughly conscious ignorance is the prelude to every real advance in science. God is almighty. Science is not omnipotent. God's wisdom is much higher than our wisdom. Pitfall 8. Imitating nature's advanced technology without appreciating the origin of the technology, that is, without attributing to God. Carbon dioxide emissions from electricity generation are a major cause of global warming and climate change because carbon dioxide absorbs the sun's heat, warming the earth. This polar bear is having a hard time because it needs ice. Plants absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen. And we do the opposite. We give out carbon dioxide and breathe in oxygen. And plants do this because of a process known as photosynthesis. In this process, light from the sun shines onto this leaf, causing this leaf to take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. And this is the reaction which constitute photosynthesis. It'd be wonderful if we can carry out photosynthesis in a factory. Then we might be able to solve the global warming problem. So there's a lot of research going on trying to imitate photosynthesis in the lab. But the results are not very good compared to what nature's performance is in relation to photosynthesis. So pitfall 8 is imitating nature's advanced technology without appreciating the origin of the technology, without attributing to God. So there are these 8 pitfalls that I have covered. Not recognizing the limitations of science. Anything that cannot be proven by science is not trusted. Not recognizing that theory must be supported by experiment. Accepting consensus science. Interpreting scientific data beyond the correct meaning. Not recognizing historical records. Understanding a process is taken to imply that the process does not need God's involvement. Imitating the advanced technology of nature without appreciating the greatness of nature. These are some of scientists' frequent issues: being too arrogant and self-confident in front of God, thinking that God must obey natural science, not realizing that the intelligence of people is much lower than that of God, not realizing the high importance of knowing God, not thinking about life after death. Michael Faraday was another scientist of the past centuries who believed in God. He is the father of electromagnetism and electrochemistry. He said, "There is nothing quite as frightening as someone who knows they are right." Today's many scientists, your God is too small. I think that's because of pride in front of God. Who are we? How can we be arrogant before God? There is no conflict between science and faith, but science is very limited. Life is short. Do you know where you will go after death? Do not wait till your life is about to end. Relate to God. The earlier, the better. This is not blind faith, but is based on personally experiencing God. It's just like experiencing the love of your dad. There's no proof needed for your dad. Becoming God's child is the greatest thing that can happen to a person. Let God be God. Give credit to God for his work. May God bless you. Thank you.